And Amy, I can't believe what I'm reading these days, and from otherwise thoughtful, even though I disagree with them sometimes, op-ed writers like John Podhoretz, writing in the New York Post. He does a sober analysis in support of the thesis that Oprah is the Democrats' best hope for president in 2020.
I don't think it's that crazy.
No, I thought it was going to be The Rock. So
Oh,
that's why,
yeah. No, The Rock has said that he's not going to run, but Oprah, she can relate to people, and people love her.
Yeah, no, I know. Because she gives them cars.
You get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. Best episode.
Yeah, so the 2020 race is up in earnest even before we get to the midterms. That's just the nature of the perpetual campaign cycle.
Who would be her vice president?
Obviously, Gail.
Oh. Why would I even ask? You're right.
For more on this topic and others, we're pleased to be joined by Bret Baier, host of Anchor Special Report, of course, 5 p.m. Chicago time on Fox News Channel on the weekdays. Also the author of the book about Eisenhower that has come out recently, 3 days in January. Bret, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning. It'd be a whole new, my favorite things every year.
Yeah.
From the White House.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, we'd all get a reading list. We'd all have to read more Toni Morrison than any of us would ever want to read. It's going to be it's very interesting. What about, everybody's running for president in 2020 and the Democrats looking dangerously, I think, to try and replicate what Republicans did. And Republicans dangerously, although it worked out for them, trying to replicate Trump trying to replicate what Obama did. In other words, cult of personality politics, both sides are trying to play.
Yeah, it is a dangerous game, trust me, as our first debate had 17 candidates, and we had to separate them into two stages. That is not pretty at the beginning, and it also creates a hole for somebody to win with 25%. And when you have that, you can get nominees that are not exactly what the party thought they were going to get.
Yeah.
So I watched your program last night. You had Health and Human Service Secretary Tom Price for his first TV interview. It was a fascinating interview, but I loved when you asked him, what were you thinking? Because really, what was he thinking?
Yeah. Well, listen, I was trying to get to the heart of, what he said in the release was it was a mistake. But, you've got 26 legs of these flights. This is a guy who was a super fiscal hawk as a Georgia congressman. Went after Nancy Pelosi for private flights back to San Francisco. Always was figuring out ways to cut money and to save, and wrote op-eds all the time about it. So, the one where he drives 45 minutes to Dulles, gets on a corporate aircraft to fly to Philadelphia, and fly back for $25,000.
Oh my gosh!
Where Amtrak, you could go for an hour and a half for about $250 round trip.
Yeah, but let's be fair though. If he had to take Amtrak, he probably would have had to sit next to Joe Biden, and nobody should have to endure that.
Well, what was that meeting that he had to go to? And what meeting was so important that he had to take a private plane for $25,000?
It was a speech, and that was the other problem. Is that these weren't like he was going to solve the anthrax problem in some place. These were speeches to, either drug companies or actually friends of his who invited him to speak on some health issue. Some of them dealt with places where he had property, like St. Simon's Island, or some of them where he had a condo and he went to lunch with his son. I'm not saying that all of that is bad on a federal, secretary's time. It just doesn't look good when the corporate jet is used to get there.
Well, right, and he's it's inappropriate, and hasn't he already committed to reimburse the cost?
$51,000.
Yeah,
of the $400,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So for whatever
he
was
reimbursed his seats.
His seats, okay.
Yeah, but does he have a chance of losing his job, Bret?
Yeah, if you look at how the president reacted, every time he's been asked, he either walked away or said, "We'll see," if he was going to fire him. So, yeah, he does. I don't think he will, personally. I think the replacement cost and time President Trump will look at that and say it's not worth it. But he clearly got his knuckles wrapped by the president.
Well, even though sort of Obamacare replaces by the boards, there's still a lot that's done administratively by HHS with respect to the healthcare system in America in its current kind of confused incarnation. And so, you want to lean on his expertise, I suspect, for what's going on while this is still all, a very confused environment.
Yeah, and plus you don't want another nomination hearing.
You
don't
exactly.
want to put another person up in front of the Senate to get grilled about all of the ways that you lost on health care.
That's a good point as well. Speaking of the Senate, are we going to have what Kim Strassel describes as the Never Trump triumvirate? Rand Paul, John McCain, Susan Collins. Are they going to be problems again when it comes to this tax reform proposal that the president has advanced, do you think?
I think Rand Paul potentially could be. There's a little bit of shell game in this dynamic scoring about trying to score the growth that all of these tax cuts will give to the country. I mean, if you're Art Laffer and pure supply side, you believe that wholeheartedly, that the growth could be exponential and thereby overtake the deficit debt numbers that you're going to run to get there. But if you're Rand Paul, you look at those numbers differently, and so he could be a little bit of a problem. The others, I don't think so. I think Republicans overall really want a W and have to get one.
So what do you think? I mean, do you think there's a possibility it'll pass on the House floor? We don't have all the details of the new tax plan, but so far, what's the buzz in Washington?
So the process is you have to pass the budget first, which will come sometime in mid to late October, and that will give you a number of how much money you're dealing with and how deep the tax cuts can go. The White House says they're not going to go off of 20% for a corporate tax. They are standing by a repeal of the estate tax, and they insist that middle-class taxpayers are going to pay less, but say that in some states with state and local taxes, that may not be entirely true. So they've got to figure out a way to sell it to the middle class that makes it more middle class and less wealth tax.
Before we let you go and enjoy your weekend, well, after you do your show later, of course.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if you're watching how Megyn Kelly is being treated, your former co-host on so many election nights and things like that. I know you guys work closely together and you have great affinity for her. And she's kind of enduring a lot of heat these days for some of the interviews she did initially when she moved over to NBC and now with the first few episodes of her show and what your reaction is to the reactions to Megyn.
Yeah, I texted with her, said, congrats on the show. I sent out a tweet saying really how I felt. I mean, we spent a lot of time on the set together laughing, and she's got an amazing sense of humor. So I figured this is going to be a great ride. That's what I said in the tweet. I do think the media who cover media were anxious to take swipes.
Yeah. And
I think over time that it'll all settle down and she'll get her sea legs. I think it's a tough thing to handle a show with a studio audience every day, and I haven't been watching it. I've seen the clips, and I know it's a juggle.
And to handle those Hollywood types, I mean, they are vicious. Jane Fonda and then Deborah Messing from Will and Grace. They're just, I didn't think that, I don't know. I didn't like the way they treated her, but I'm biased. I love Megyn Kelly too.
Yeah.
She was my intern, Brett.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Well, at NBC, she was a lawyer here in Chicago, and she wanted to get into television. So she job shadowed myself and Anna DeVlantis for a while at Channel 5. Yeah, and she was great.
Yeah. And then
and now look at her now. Look at her go.
Yeah. She learned everything not to do, and then she went on to a great career.
She'll be fine, I guarantee you.
Yeah, she will.
Figures out how to make it a win.
Yeah, but now, just out of curiosity, with the time you spent, all these personalities you have on the show and deep thinkers are interesting to people. Who has the more fun-loving sense of humor? Who have you had more laughs with, Megyn Kelly or Charles Krauthammer?
Only by pure time has been Charles, because every commercial break he's cutting up. in a very dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
Really?
Charles, by the way, he should be coming back. He's been recovering from surgery, and a lot of people ask.
Yeah.
He had some complications. It's taken longer than he thought, but he should be back soon.
Oh, good.
Oh,
well, that's good to
good.
hear. And I
miss
thought,
him.
we've talked to Charles Kramer once or twice on the show, but you get a sense from his commentary, which is always quite compelling, that he's got this great sense of humor. So it's interesting to hear off camera that he's cutting people up. In a good way. It's funny.
Big time.
Yeah.
I mean, like every commercial break.
Very good.
Really good.
All right, he is Bret Baier, anchor special report, weekdays 5 p.m. Chicago time on Fox, and also pick up his book about the Eisenhower administration, 3 days in January. Bret, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
What do you got for me, Hefe?